There exists among us a rare breed of women who carry an intelligence that cannot be measured by conventional standards, an invisible wisdom that flows like underground rivers through the landscape of human consciousness. You know her when you meet her, though you might not understand why her presence shifts something deep within your chest, why her silence speaks louder than 1,000 words. This hidden form of intelligence has fascinated those of us in depth psychology for generations. In my own work, I have recognized that certain women possess what I have termed a superior feeling function, a psychological capacity that transcends ordinary emotional sensitivity. These women do not simply feel more, they perceive through dimensions that remain invisible to most. They read the energetic signatures of souls, decode the symbolic language of the unconscious, and navigate reality through channels that science has yet to map. What I wish to illuminate for you are 6 traits that distinguish these spiritually intelligent women from those who merely perform spirituality or mistake emotional reactivity for authentic insight. These characteristics operate in the shadows of consciousness. They are often misunderstood by a world that values the quantifiable over the mystical. Yet for those who possess them, these traits represent both a gift and a burden, a calling that demands they walk between worlds while remaining grounded in this one. The first invisible trait reveals itself through their uncanny ability to read energies that others cannot perceive. When she enters a room, something shifts. The atmosphere changes not because of what she does or says, but because of what she emanates. I came to understand this phenomenon through my concept of the feeling function, when developed to its highest expression. Unlike sentimentalism or emotional reactivity, this superior feeling operates as a finely tuned instrument that detects the subtle vibrations of authenticity, deception, pain, and joy that radiate from every human encounter. These women function as living barometers of the human condition. They sense the unspoken tensions between couples at dinner parties, feel the repressed grief of the cheerful neighbor, and detect the hidden agenda behind the charming facade. This is not paranoia or projection, it is pattern recognition, operating at frequencies most people cannot access. Their nervous systems have been calibrated through years of hypervigilance, trauma, or simple genetic inheritance to pick up signals that others miss entirely. The ancestral component cannot be ignored. These women often carry the energetic legacy of grandmothers and great-grandmothers who developed this radar out of necessity, women who had to read the emotional climate of their households to ensure survival, who learned to detect danger in a husband's footstep or opportunity in a neighbor's glance. This inherited wisdom flows through bloodlines like a river of knowing, surfacing in daughters who find themselves overwhelmed in crowds, exhausted after social gatherings, or strangely certain about people they have just met. Yet this gift comes wrapped in thorns. To see clearly is to see what others prefer to keep hidden. To feel authentically is to recognize performance and pretense everywhere. These women often find themselves isolated not by choice, but by the sheer intensity of their perceptual accuracy. They become mirrors that reflect back truths people are not ready to face. Oracles speaking languages that sound like judgment to those still sleeping in their illusions. Have you ever walked into a space and immediately known something was wrong even though everyone seemed perfectly fine? Have you ever felt an instant aversion to someone that later proved justified, though you could not explain your initial reaction? This is the first glimpse into the realm of energetic literacy, a skill that transforms these women into unwitting guardians of emotional truth. The second trait emerges through their intimate relationship with what I have called the collective unconscious. That vast reservoir of archetypal patterns and universal symbols that shape human experience across cultures and centuries. While most people catch occasional glimpses of this deeper reality through dreams or moments of inspiration, spiritually intelligent women maintain open channels to this wellspring of wisdom. They dream in symbols that later manifest in waking life, experience synchronicities with a frequency that defies statistical probability, and receive guidance through intuitive flashes that prove remarkably accurate. I observe that certain individuals possess what I termed a more permeable ego boundary, allowing them to access collective wisdom without losing their individual identity. These women embody this rare capacity. They serve as translators between the symbolic realm and practical reality, taking the abstract language of the unconscious and rendering it into actionable insight. A dream about water becomes guidance about emotional healing. A chance encounter with a specific animal becomes a message about personal power. A recurring number pattern becomes confirmation of being on the right path. This connection to the collective unconscious amplifies their experience of meaningful coincidences. While others dismiss such events as random chance, these women recognize them as communications from the deeper intelligence that orchestrates reality behind the scenes. They learn to trust these synchronistic guideposts, allowing them to navigate life with a sense of flow and timing that appears magical to observers, but feels perfectly natural to them. They understand that the universe speaks in whispers and symbols, and they have developed the inner ears to listen. The phenomenon extends beyond personal guidance into collective service. These women often find themselves in the right place at the right time to offer exactly what someone needs, not through planning, but through following invisible currents of meaning. They become bridges between the material and spiritual dimensions, translating universal wisdom into human understanding through their presence, their words, and their very being. Their lives become stories of mythic proportions, filled with encounters that feel scripted by some benevolent cosmic intelligence. This leads naturally to their third characteristic, sacred solitude. Choosing isolation not from misanthropy but from wisdom, they understand that the deepest transformations happen in silence, away from the opinions and energies of others. Their solitude is not loneliness, it is laboratory work for the soul. My concept of individuation requires periods of withdrawal from collective influences to discover one's authentic self. These women instinctively honor this process, creating space for their inner voice to emerge above the noise of social expectations. They distinguish between solitude that heals and isolation that wounds, choosing the former as a conscious practice rather than accepting the latter as a punishment. When they withdraw, they are not running from life. They are diving deeper into it. The sacred nature of their solitude becomes apparent in how they use this time. Rather than numbing themselves with distractions, they engage in practices that enhance their connection to inner wisdom. Journaling, meditating, creating, or simply sitting in silence, allowing the sediment of daily experience to settle so that clarity can emerge. These periods of withdrawal become times of intense creativity and spiritual communication, where insights download and perspectives shift in ways that transform their entire understanding of existence. Yet this natural rhythm of withdrawal and engagement often confuses family members and friends, who interpret their need for space as rejection or depression. These women must learn to honor their energetic cycles without guilt, understanding that their depth requires regular returns to the inner well. They discover that attempting to maintain constant social connection depletes their spiritual resources and diminishes their ability to serve others authentically. Their solitude becomes an act of self-preservation that ultimately benefits everyone in their orbit. The fourth trait reveals perhaps the most profound aspect of their spiritual intelligence: their capacity to transform personal suffering into universal wisdom through what I call the transcendent function. These women do not simply endure pain, they alchemize it. They descend voluntarily into their own underworld, facing the demons that others spend lifetimes avoiding, and emerge carrying treasures that can only be found in the depths of personal hell. This process mirrors the ancient archetype of the wounded healer, the one who gains the power to heal others precisely through intimate knowledge of suffering. I recognize this pattern in many of my patients, particularly women who had endured significant trauma or loss. Rather than remaining victims of their circumstances, they transform their wounds into sources of compassion and insight that serve the collective healing process. Their pain becomes their qualification, their suffering their certification as guides for others walking similar paths. The transcendent function operates by holding opposites in tension until a third possibility emerges. These women learn to embrace both their light and shadow, their joy and grief, their strength and vulnerability. Instead of choosing sides in the war between opposing forces within themselves, they become the sacred marriage of these opposites, giving birth to a new level of consciousness that transcends the original conflict. Their integrated wholeness becomes a beacon for others still struggling with inner fragmentation. This alchemical process requires tremendous courage and commitment to truth over comfort. These women must be willing to feel everything fully to resist the temptation to spiritually bypass their pain through premature forgiveness or positive thinking. They learn that healing is not the absence of wounds, but the transformation of wounds into wisdom. Their scars become sacred sites, pilgrimage destinations for their own souls, and eventually for others seeking similar transformation. The responsibility that comes with this wisdom cannot be understated. Once you have transformed lead into gold, once you have walked through fire and emerged refined rather than destroyed, you become accountable to the collective healing process. These women often find themselves drawn to serve as counselors, teachers, artists, or healers, using their transmuted pain as medicine for a wounded world. The fifth hallmark of these women is not something you hear in their words, but something you feel in their very presence. I described it as therapeutic presence, a way of communicating that relies less on speech and more on the vibration of being itself. For them, silence is never empty. It is eloquence distilled. Their quietude can heal in ways 100 sermons cannot. Often the greatest gift they give another person is not advice or solutions, but the willingness to sit beside them, to witness their reality without judgment, without interference, without trying to fix what is unfolding. This form of communication bypasses the intellect and speaks directly to the soul. When such a woman enters a space marked by suffering, her presence alone whispers, "It is possible to endure. It is possible to emerge from darkness with light still intact." She does not need to retell her struggles or dress them in inspirational slogans. Her existence, grounded, whole, and unbroken, is already the living testimony that transformation is real. Because they know the power of language, they never use it carelessly. For them, words are instruments, not noise. Each syllable is weighted with intention, chosen for clarity rather than excess. They understand that speech can create or destroy, mend or wound. Where many scatter words loosely, they speak sparingly, knowing that in restraint lies resonance. Their silence carries fullness and unspoken compassion, a depth that holds more meaning than chatter ever could. This discipline with expression extends into the way they manage their energy. They have learned, often through trial and error, that sensitivity requires stewardship. Not every room deserves their full openness. Not every conversation merits their deepest attention. By honoring these natural boundaries, they are able to give generously without depleting themselves. Like seasoned musicians, they know when to let sound fill the air and when to rest into silence. It is no wonder that people frequently report feeling uplifted after even brief contact with them. This is not a coincidence. They are, in essence, human tuning forks, resonating at higher frequencies and drawing others into alignment through unconscious attunement, without a single word. They remind others of their innate capacity for balance, clarity, and peace. The sixth and final quality reveals itself not in what they do, but in what life brings to them. These women seem to live in an atmosphere where meaning gathers, where coincidence turns sacred, where synchronicity is the rule rather than the exception. They do not chase mystical encounters, they magnetize them. Their consciousness operates like a beacon, calling forth experiences, people, and opportunities that further their own evolution and the awakening of those around them. I called this phenomenon synchronicity, the clustering of meaningful coincidences that cannot be explained by chance alone. Where others search frantically for signs, these women simply live in alignment, and the signs come. Their lives read like sacred texts, filled with chapters written by an unseen intelligence that arranges moments with precision and purpose. This magnetism functions through what I identified as autonomous complexes. In most people, these inner patterns act unconsciously, projecting chaos and distortion into relationships. But in women of spiritual intelligence, the same mechanisms become refined. Their inner life transforms into an antenna tuned to the frequencies of truth and purpose. And yet, such a gift requires careful discernment. Not everything that sparkles is divine guidance. Not every coincidence is destiny. They must learn to separate genuine direction from ego-driven fantasy, sacred timing from personal impatience. Without this clarity, their gift could easily slip into illusion. With it, they become master navigators, steering through the ocean of life with trust and discernment. Their presence in any circle inevitably stirs change. They do not intend to provoke transformation, yet transformation happens simply by being. They awaken questions others did not know they carried. Their authenticity becomes a mirror that compels others to examine their masks. Their light casts shadows others must confront. This catalytic force flows not from intention, but from resonance. As these women deepen into maturity, a paradox arises. The more extraordinary their abilities, the more ordinary they appear. The dramatic dissolves into simplicity. What once seemed mystical becomes their second nature. They cease to identify as special, recognizing their gifts as instruments of service, not badges of superiority. This process leads to what I call the return to simplicity. Having traveled through the labyrinth of shadows and light, having integrated their depths and their heights, they arrive at a profound ordinariness. Their power no longer shouts, it whispers, it expresses itself not in spectacle but in quiet authenticity. They no longer seek recognition. They no longer hunger for validation. Their assurance comes from within, from the unshakable sense that by being who they are, whole, present, attuned, they are fulfilling their role. The impact they leave behind may never be measured in numbers or applause. It will be etched instead in unseen places. The hearts they soothed, the lives they gently shifted, the souls they reminded of their own depth. This perhaps is the ultimate expression of spiritual intelligence, the recognition that true influence is invisible, that true authority comes through love rather than control, through example rather than command. They become living prayers, walking meditations, quiet embodiments of what it means to move through life with grace in a world obsessed with noise. The solitude that once felt like exile now becomes sanctuary. The sensitivity that once seemed like a curse now glimmers as their greatest strength. The wisdom that once alienated them now emerges as medicine for a weary world. They learn to trust the intelligence moving through them even when they cannot explain it. They learn to cherish their difference as design rather than defect. They embrace the mystery of their calling, knowing it may never be fully understood, even by themselves. If you have felt this resonance within, know that you too carry part of this lineage. Your sensitivity is not weakness but strength. Your solitude is not absence but restoration. Your scars are not disfigurements but sacred inscriptions of wisdom. This path is not simple. It requires courage to believe what others cannot see, faith to follow guidance that logic cannot trace, and strength to remain true in a culture that prizes conformity. But for those who walk it, there is no alternative. This intelligence is not optional. It is the very essence of who you are. The invisible traits you bear are not accidents. They are assignments, callings, from the deeper intelligence that underlies all existence. Trust the river flowing through you. Honor the sensitivity that defines you. Embrace the solitude that shapes you. Transform the pain that refines you. Speak in silences that resound louder than words. Welcome the sacred encounters that seek you. If these words touch a place within you, pause and reflect. Which of these traits do you recognize most clearly in yourself? How have they guided your own unfolding? Your story matters. Your experience validates others. Your willingness to be visible encourages countless women to embrace their own hidden gifts. The journey does not end here. There are more depths of the feminine psyche to uncover, more hidden gifts to honor, more wisdom waiting to rise. And as I have often reminded, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. I once remarked that the greatest task of every individual is to become whole, to weave together the fragments of psyche into an integrated self. For the spiritually intelligent women we are exploring, this wholeness is not merely a private quest, but a living transmission. Their very existence challenges the collective to remember what lies forgotten, that depth, meaning, and authenticity are not luxuries, but necessities for the soul. While our initial exploration revealed the 6 invisible traits that shaped their journey, we must now turn toward what happens when these traits are lived over time. How do they evolve? How do they alter relationships, society, and the spiritual atmosphere of our age? What responsibilities emerge when one carries such gifts? The alchemy of shadow and light. Every one of these women must at some point face the raw material of her own shadow. I insisted that no real transformation occurs without a descent, a confrontation with the hidden and often disowned parts of oneself. For the spiritually intelligent, this descent is not optional. Their heightened perception makes denial nearly impossible. They feel the fractures, the unresolved traumas, the unconscious compulsions, not just in others, but in themselves. To carry spiritual intelligence is to carry a mirror turned inward as much as outward. They cannot avoid the work of integrating what they fear, envy, or resist. The very sensitivity that makes them gifted also ensures they cannot comfortably bypass their wounds. The shadow calls, and they must answer. But unlike those who collapse beneath their pain, these women discover a way to use it as material for alchemy. Suffering becomes a crucible, a fire in which their illusions are burned away and their essence clarified. They emerge, not purified in the sense of flawlessness, but integrated, able to hold contradictions without breaking, able to live with paradox without fleeing. This alchemical process is why they are able to guide others. It is not theory. It is embodied knowledge paid for with tears, sleepless nights, and choices made at the edge of despair. They know healing not because they read it in books, but because they have lived it in their marrow. Relationships are one of the most challenging arenas for these women. Their sensitivity does not allow them to float on the surface of connection. They feel the currents beneath the words, the motives behind the gestures, the hidden contracts, unspoken but deeply binding. This means relationships for them are never casual. They become laboratories for truth. Friendships, romances, even brief encounters hold the potential for deep teaching. While others may be content with polite pretense, these women see too clearly. They know when affection is genuine and when it is strategy. They sense when intimacy is authentic and when it is performance. Often, this creates friction. Partners may accuse them of being too intense, too analytical, too unwilling to let things go. But in truth, what unsettles others is not judgment, but clarity. These women hold up mirrors, and not everyone is ready to look. Yet when relationships align with authenticity, they flourish. The bond becomes more than companionship, it becomes a sacred space where two souls evolve together. Trust deepens, creativity flows, and a profound sense of safety emerges, not because challenges disappear, but because honesty is non-negotiable. The burden of authenticity is significant. I once observed that loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate what matters most. For the spiritually intelligent woman, this is an ever-present tension. She longs for community, yet she cannot betray her truth for the comfort of belonging. This makes her life appear solitary at times. Others may misinterpret her boundaries as coldness, her solitude as rejection, but what she is really protecting is her authenticity. She knows that if she betrays her own knowing, she loses the very gift she was born to carry. The burden of authenticity often means she will be misunderstood. Her refusal to participate in shallow games, her unwillingness to nod along with falsehood, her choice to withdraw rather than conform. These things can cost her friendships, status, even love. But over time she learns that the cost of compromise is far greater than the cost of standing alone, living in synchronicity. One of the most extraordinary aspects of their journey is the way synchronicity becomes a guiding principle. I define synchronicity as meaningful coincidence, the meeting of inner and outer events in a way that defies probability, yet carries profound significance. For these women, synchronicity is not rare. It is woven into daily life. They notice the patterns. Others dismiss the recurring symbol in dreams that echoes in waking encounters. The stranger whose words answer an unspoken question. The timing of opportunities that arrive just when they are ready to receive them. Living by synchronicity requires trust. It demands surrender to a larger intelligence, a willingness to move when the signs appear, even when logic protests. This is not superstition, but alignment. They learn to live as if life itself were speaking to them because it is. This way of living often confounds those around them. friends may call it luck, fate, or coincidence. But for these women, it feels like partnership with the universe. They understand that meaning is not something to be manufactured, but something to be perceived. And when perceived, it points the way. Service without performance, this is their essence. As their journey deepens, many of these women are called into roles of service: healers, teachers, artists, guides. But the most remarkable aspect of their service is that it does not rely on performance. They do not need stages, spotlights, or titles. Their service flows through the fabric of their ordinary lives: a conversation at a bus stop, a glance across a crowded room, a few words spoken at the right time. These small acts ripple outward in ways they may never fully see. Their very being becomes a ministry, an offering of presence that heals without spectacle. I noted that the mark of true transformation is simplicity. The spiritually intelligent woman embodies this. She has no need to announce her wisdom. She lives it. And in doing so, she invites others to remember their own. The cultural tension is ever present. Every era carries its own blindness. In her time, the blindness was scientific materialism. The belief that only what could be measured, weighed, or dissected was real. In every age, spiritually intelligent women have always stood out because they embody what cannot be quantified: depth. This creates tension. The world rewards speed, but they move at the rhythm of intuition. The culture celebrates visibility, but their greatest work happens in quiet. Society applauds external achievement while they measure life by inner transformation. To live in such contrast is to live as a paradox, always slightly out of sync with the dominant beat of the age. And yet, it is precisely this dissonance that gives them power. They remind us that life is not a race, but a pilgrimage, that value is not in appearance but in authenticity, that wisdom is not loud but resonant. One cannot speak of these women without acknowledging the lineages they carry. Their gifts rarely arise in isolation. Often they inherit a psychic sensitivity honed by generations of women who had no choice but to read the invisible. Grandmothers who knew when danger was near, the shift in a husband's tone. Mothers who sensed betrayal in the silence between words. Ancestors who survived not by force, but by intuition. This ancestral wisdom does not vanish. It lives on, encoded in nervous systems, whispered in dreams, carried in the subtle instincts of daughters who may not even know the stories, but carry their imprint nonetheless. The spiritually intelligent woman often discovers that what she feels is not only hers, but the echo of lives before her. She carries the memory of survival strategies, the residue of traumas, and the blessings of strength that have been passed down like sacred heirlooms. When she learns to work with this inheritance consciously, it becomes a source of immense power. She becomes not just an individual, but a living bridge between past and future. Her healing heals backward and forward, transforming family lines and altering destinies. I call this the work of the collective unconscious. The recognition that our personal psyche is always entangled with larger patterns spanning generations. The paradox of visibility operates here. There is a paradox that runs through the lives of these women. On one hand, their gifts draw attention. People sense something unusual about them. They become sought after for advice, comfort, or simply the aura they carry. On the other hand, they often long for invisibility, for the freedom to move through the world without constantly being pulled into the needs of others. This paradox creates a lifelong dance between presence and retreat. Sometimes they step forward, speaking truth into a space that desperately needs it. Other times they vanish into solitude, protecting their inner fire from being consumed by constant demand. Over time they discover that this rhythm, emergence and withdrawal, visibility and invisibility, is not a flaw, but a design. Just as the moon waxes and wanes, their presence follows cycles. They learn to honor the seasons of their energy, giving when the well is full, retreating when it is time to refill. To live as a mirror is to endure projection. Others see in them what they cannot face in themselves. Some will idealize them, calling them angels, healers, even saviors. Others will resent them, accusing them of being too sensitive, too intense, too different. Both responses miss the truth. The spiritually intelligent woman is not superhuman, she is deeply human, with all the contradictions and vulnerabilities that entails. But because her presence stirs the unconscious in others, she becomes a canvas onto which people paint their unacknowledged desires and fears. I warned about this dynamic in therapeutic relationships, calling it transference. But outside therapy, it plays out in families, friendships, workplaces. These women must learn to recognize projection for what it is, not truth, but reflection. If they mistake projection for reality, they risk either inflating into holes they cannot sustain or collapsing under criticism that does not belong to them. When they master this discernment, they become freer. They no longer carry the burden of being who others imagine them to be. They stand simply as themselves, offering truth without demand, presence without performance, power without domination. Perhaps the most radical aspect of their intelligence is the way they embody power. In a world that often equates power with domination, control, and force, they reveal another model. Their power flows through presence, through inspiration, through resonance. They do not impose, they invite. They do not manipulate, they illuminate. This is not weakness, but a deeper strength. I wrote that true authority arises from alignment with the self, the archetypal center of wholeness that transcends ego. When a woman lives from this place, her influence radiates naturally. She does not need to argue for it or fight for it. People feel it. Such power may not topple governments or dominate headlines, but it changes lives in quieter ways. It shifts conversations. It plants seeds of courage. It awakens possibilities that seemed impossible. It is subtle, but it is unstoppable. The return to the ordinary. After years of walking between worlds, something beautiful happens. These women begin to look ordinary again. Not because their gifts have faded, but because they have integrated them so deeply that they no longer need to dramatize them. The extraordinary becomes natural. The mystical becomes woven into the fabric of everyday life. They may garden, teach, raise children, run businesses, outwardly ordinary tasks, but within their perception remains attuned to the unseen, their hearts aligned with deeper rhythms. This is what I meant by individuation, not escape from the world, but deeper participation in it. The goal is not to float above life in constant transcendence, but to walk it with grounded wisdom, embodying the eternal in the midst of the everyday. And so, the spiritually intelligent woman lives her paradox, extraordinary yet ordinary, visible yet invisible, burdened yet blessed. She embodies a wisdom the world desperately needs, even when the world does not know how to name it, the integration of wholeness. I insisted that individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole, is not a luxury, but a necessity for the soul, for the spiritually intelligent woman. Individuation is not abstract theory. It is her daily reality. She lives at the intersection of light and shadow, constantly integrating what others prefer to ignore. Her intelligence is not about collecting facts or mastering techniques. It is about weaving together all parts of herself, the intuitive and the rational, the sensitive and the strong, the joyful and the grieving. She does not seek to eliminate contradiction. She seeks to embrace it until a deeper harmony emerges. This is why she so often confounds the expectations of others. Just when people think they know her, she shifts. Just when society tries to confine her, she expands. She embodies what I call the transcendent function, the mysterious ability of the psyche to birth a new possibility. When opposites are held together without collapse, an invisible influence emerges. Perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of her path is that her greatest influence is often invisible. She does not build empires or demand the spotlight. Her power moves through subtler channels. The words spoken at the right time, the presence that calms chaos, the silence that exposes truth. The spiritually intelligent woman may never be written about in history books, but her impact ripples through families, communities, and generations. A child grows up freer because she refused to perpetuate silence. A friend finds courage because she modeled authenticity. A partner awakens because she insisted on depth over performance. In a culture obsessed with visibility, she teaches that the unseen is just as real, just as powerful, like roots beneath the soil. Her influence sustains life even when it is not recognized. The legacy of sensitivity, for too long dismissed as weakness, but I knew, and these women prove, that sensitivity is a form of intelligence, one that perceives what lies beneath surfaces, one that hears the whispers of the unconscious, one that senses the future, stirring before it arrives. Their legacy is to restore sensitivity to its rightful place as strength, to show the world that empathy is not naivety, that intuition is not illusion, that stillness is not laziness. Their lives become living counter-arguments to a culture addicted to speed and noise. They remind us that wisdom often comes quietly, that guidance often arrives through subtle signs, that healing often requires presence more than words. The responsibility of the gift, yet such intelligence is not without burden. To see deeply is to carry truths others avoid. To feel intensely is to risk exhaustion. To live authentically is to face rejection. The spiritually intelligent woman learns that responsibility grows alongside her gift. She cannot use her perception to manipulate. She cannot exploit her sensitivity for ego. She cannot collapse into victimhood when the world misunderstands her. Instead, she learns discernment. She cultivates boundaries. She chooses service without savior, presence without performance. She embraces the paradox of being both strong and vulnerable, both ordinary and extraordinary, returning to simplicity. At the end of her journey, what remains is not drama but simplicity. She has walked through complexity, the shadow, the projections, the paradoxes, and emerged into a clearer, gentler way of being. Her life no longer needs to prove anything. Her wisdom no longer needs to advertise itself. She embodies what I called the self, the center that unites all opposites, the quiet axis around which life turns. She may appear ordinary to the world. She may live without titles or accolades. Yet within her is a harmony that radiates without effort. She has become, in my words, an instance of the eternal in the temporal, a living invitation. If you recognize yourself in these descriptions, know this: you are not alone, and you are not mistaken. The traits you carry are not accidents, they are assignments, callings from the deeper intelligence that underlies all existence. Trust the river flowing through you. Honor the sensitivity that defines you. Embrace the solitude that shapes you. Transform the pain that refines you. Speak in silences that resound louder than words. Welcome the sacred encounters that seek you. If these words touch a place within you, pause and reflect. Which of these traits do you recognize most clearly in yourself? How have they guided your own unfolding? Your story matters. Your experience validates others. Your willingness to be visible encourages countless women to embrace their own hidden gifts. The journey does not end here. There are more depths of the feminine psyche to uncover, more hidden gifts to honor, more wisdom waiting to rise. And as I have often reminded, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are.